Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and I'm up very late inventing things for you. Or not exactly inventing, because this is something that existed, but I've been sort of fine-tuning it. Here, let's play Alien Kittens like you never heard it before. That's right. This is Voice of the Starship, VST edition. And it is a sort of plugin that has been designed to basically be like an oscillator. It's a noise generator. Kind of like, I bet I can pull this one up. I better mute it first. Let's check this out here. Utility plugins, test oscillator, stereo. You can get a noise plugin here. Let's give it a pink noise. It's 12 dB down. That is what Logic considers a pink noise. Can turn it down a little more to make it less annoying, but it's still going to be kind of like that. If you wanted a white noise, it would look kind of like this. But who needs pink noise or white noise when you have Voice of the Starship? That a bit different there. Voice of the Starship is for making backgrounds and sort of a variety of things, actually. It'll work as a LFO, believe it or not. Here's how it works. We've got these algorithms, which will give you different types of noise behavior, and then the filter as you can hear, it is a filter which is a combination IIR and averages. So as you start really losing the highs, they also develop these comb filter qualities, but averages sound good. So I'm using this. If you didn't see this, you'd never know that there was anything about it. You would go, wow, that's a good filter. And the algorithm also is very interesting. For instance, here's algorithm 0. It's very white noisy. In fact, you can have it be perfectly and absolutely flat, although it's not very loud under these circumstances. But then as we start putting the filter in, we start getting the tone qualities happening. Now that might seem like a noise profile that is interesting or worth something, but that's just scratching the surface, because Voice of the Starship is capable of a lot more than this. Check this out. Rain on a hot tin roof. That slight crackly quality is something that different algorithms have more or less of, like 0 doesn't have any. It's very smooth. And you got some of that with this, and pitch goes a little bit lower. Lower still. Then we have a sort of mid-range equality that comes in. This could definitely be something like a rainstorm. Develops even more power here. This might be a wind around some alpine lodge. Notice that that has more bass than this one. This one might work out actually as a sort of rainstorm. If you adjust the tonalities of these things, you can dial in for your sound effects pleasure whatever you might need. And check this out. This is the one that brings in some serious low frequency rumble, which will continue to be the case all the way to 16. This could be your spaceship. Off we go on the Starship airwindows. Now, spaceship noises are often sort of drones and things, but this is a organically generated sort of Brownian motion noise. And the reason it develops these characteristics, like that versus this, is because the voice of the Starship algorithm, it's doing a purely random walk which would generate DC quite powerfully. But periodically, and by periodically I mean it's a complicated residue sequence thing, it will force the direction of the random walk to be in the direction of 0. So how often that happens? Well, in 0, 0 it's happening very often, practically constantly. And this lets it wander a little farther away, so on and so forth. For some reason, this one is slightly bigger than this one. And then here's where we start getting the real depth out of it. Now, as we continue onwards, like that's slightly less of a rumble. When you filter it really heavily, it has a real spaceship quality, but if you had it quite bright, that's going to be more like a environment sound. And then as you bring in more of the body of things with the filter, it starts to sound more like heavy wind. So you can leave it more high-pitched if you don't want it to sound like massive heavy winds, or you can just run with it, or go really deep with it. Like this might be an underwater sound, but it would be better off with the bumpier sound of 7. Or keep going. 8, 9, 10. It gets deeper and deeper as you go. And as you can see, I'm measuring it all the way down to 1 hertz, and it gets real extended there. "11 is actually less bassy than 10, so when you stumble across these ones like that, that sounds like winds across a massive desert or something like that. A little more lows. They're kind of redistributed there. Like I could hear some low mids here, but then this is more just super deep, but it doesn't have quite as many of the low mids. And it's sort of getting quieter and quieter as it goes. This is also one way to get a nice little sort of meadow sound or something. There is extremely deep low bass in there, and it's really starting to take off around 20 hertz, but it's all contained. And the highs are giving us a sort of you pick the right sound and you have a nice sort of natural ambience going on. Or you could start throwing in these lower frequencies, filtering it. And you might think that this is a low frequency thing. If you set it like this, we're still getting action, but you can't hear any of it. It is see, we burst it up to here, so 12 dB or something like 500 hertz is already like 96 dB down. You're going to have a very hard time hearing any of this stuff. This is 170 or 144 dB down. This is like the theoretical limit of 24-bit right there. And that might seem interesting, but let's restart. Played it all the way through to the end. But we haven't heard 16. 16 is the LFO. You can get higher frequencies out of it, although you notice there is a heck of a big drop-off all the way up to 50 hertz. It's really not going to be showing that very much, and that's because it has a very slow stabilization function. If you have subwoofers, this is probably not going to hurt them, but you might want to turn down so that you're not shaking the neighborhood. If we have this, that again is a very natural sort of ambience. It's certainly generating a lot of low frequencies, but you consider that to be sort of light breezes. And check out what happens, what you get when you start throwing this way down. Here we have 16, algorithm 16, filter of 0. The random walks are going right up to 0 and back again. I do have this attenuated somewhat. That's a good thing. Let's attenuate it even more. There, now your output isn't blowing anything up. It's 14 bits down. But what we've got is an output that is capable of going right up to 0 in its random walk, very slowly and patiently. And almost all your audio frequencies are completely lost. So this is like a LFO waveform that you can apply to something else if you're building things inside your DAW using the capacity of plugins to run DC content. And again, I've got the output level shut right down so you can't hardly hear anything anymore. I'll demonstrate that now. It's making sound, and Voxengo span is next in line so you can see what it wants to be, but bit shift gain is cutting it right back. If I turn it off, we get the sound again. So when you go to algorithm 16 and filter of 0, this is where you get fairly well controlled random walk that's capable of hanging around at a voltage for a very long time. You can see the correlation meter is doing crazy things as well. And that's a picture of what this random walk looks like as it goes. It's just doing its thing. None of it is audio frequencies to speak of. And you could use this as some sort of signal generator. Now, if you don't want to do that, or if you want to just say, if I put it to 1, our subsonic frequencies are going to just go away very much. You can kind of almost hear it. And our really deep stuff is still quite far down. But notice what happens as I switch it back from 16 to the more audio frequency ones. 16 to 15. Immediately more audible. And every step of the way, the noise is going to get a little bit more audible in an area where you can basically hear it. And that's what Voice of the Starship is all about. It's capable of creating random brown noise, not quite, it'll do white noise at a reduced level. It'll do pinkish noise, but it will do all of these noise colors down to very deep. But if you pick the algorithms correctly, you can trap in the low end to the point where it's simply not going to whack you with tons of DC bass. Like this is about, or exactly 47 dB down on the lows compared to around 0 when it's on algorithm 16. Then if you go to algorithm 7, we're at about 24 dB or so. And you can hear much more of the lows, but again, this is keeping the extreme subs in check. It's always going to extend down smoothly to the lows, but this is usable. It's not going to be blowing up anybody's subwoofers or anything like that. It's keeping the subs in check using the technology of airwindows noise and Voice of the Starship. So, .9 is a nice way of having this go right to the edge without much misbehavior in here. Actually, let's find out if I can dial it in even closer. That makes that tail end go up a tiny bit, and this makes it go down. So it's possible to get it nice and accurate. That'll change with the algorithm. As you can see, that's sort of tucking under. So yeah, set this up right, and you have a wonderful, wonderful full range noise generator that's capable of going extremely, extremely low without misbehaving. You can even see how it's a very smooth angle here. We have such a high filter that it's not doing the nodes from the averaging. And then rather than continuing to go onwards to a very high output, it starts to roll off. And if that ain't enough, you can pick one like this and it'll roll off even more. It'll come up like this, and then just flatten right off. And you're about 54 dB down in the extreme subs. airwindows Voice of the Starship. And one of the reasons I did this is because I'm going to open source it so that people can see how I did it. Done properly, this could have nice uses in things like video games. You know, if you wanted to have a background sound, or a spaceship sound, or a on top of a mountain sound. It's just nice to be able to algorithmically generate that stuff because it has a richer, bigger, deeper sound than trying to do it out of loops and waves or worse, MP3s or something. You can have a richer and more immersive background this way, and it's not super computationally heavy. Like we've got our little CPU meter sitting up here. Ain't even touching it. Voice of the Starship was brought very, very late at night by Chris from Airwindows, and I am Chris from Airwindows. And it is supported by my Patreon. And I hope people find this useful. And it doesn't, unlike, say, noise, which has gates and things and is designed to fit with snare drums or whatever, this is just the tone generator. So hopefully if you dig into the code of it when it goes open source, it's a little easier to understand because there's less going on with it. And the different bits, like the average, which brings a richer tone to everything, that is distinguishable from the other parts around it. It's organized probably a little better than noise is. But yeah, if you just want background sound for your video game, or you want to go to sleep to a nice gentle sound of surf, automate it. Have another one generate the LFO to automate it. That's Voice of the Starship, and I hope you like it as much as I do.